After one forbidden night with Seoul's most dangerous mafia boss, Mira Clair, a black American maid trying to escape her past, discovers a truth that will trap her forever. She's pregnant with his heirs. When she tries to flee the country at dawn, Ha Joon catches her at the estate gates, his tattooed hand slamming the iron bars shut. His eyes drop to her stomach, then lock onto hers with feral possession. He leans in close, so close she can see the intricate tiger inked across his neck, and his voice cuts through the morning air like steel. "You thought you could take what belongs to me across an ocean? You're not leaving with my heirs in you. You're mine now." And in that moment, standing in her black and white maid's uniform with her passport trembling in her hand, Mira realizes freedom was always an illusion in Ha Joon's world. Hi everyone. Before we dive into this dark romance thriller set in the heart of Seoul's criminal underworld, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. Your support means everything. And make sure you comment where you're watching from. I'd love to say hello and know how far Mira and Ha Joon's story is reaching across the globe. Now, let's begin. Mira Clair had learned to disappear long before she ever stepped foot in Seoul. In New Orleans, disappearing meant keeping her head down when her mother's boyfriends came home drunk, meant walking past the corner where her cousin was shot without crying, meant smiling through her shift at the diner even when men's hands lingered too long on her waist. Disappearing was survival, and survival was all she knew. So when the opportunity came to work abroad, a live-in position for a wealthy family in South Korea, room and board included, no questions asked about her past, Mira took it without hesitation. She sold everything she owned, said goodbye to exactly no one, and boarded a plane with a single suitcase and a heart desperate for reinvention. Seoul was supposed to be her clean slate. A city so far from the ghosts of Louisiana that they couldn't possibly follow. She'd read about the lights, the efficiency, the safety. She'd imagined herself in a normal household, cleaning for some tech executive's family, maybe learning Korean, maybe finding peace. She should have known better than to believe in fresh starts. The estate was the first warning sign. Not a family home, but a fortress. High walls topped with cameras, guards at every entrance, windows that reflected sunlight like blind eyes. The agency representative who drove her there spoke in clipped English, handing her off to a stern older woman named Mrs. Kim who looked at Mira's dark skin with an expression somewhere between curiosity and disdain. "You keep to service areas," Mrs. Kim said in heavily accented English, leading Mira through marble hallways that gleamed like ice. "You do not speak unless spoken to. You do not ask questions. You do not enter the master's private rooms unless called. Understand?" Mira understood. She'd spent her whole life being told where she didn't belong. The uniform came next, a crisp black dress with white ruffled trim and a white apron, French maid style, which felt more like a costume than work clothes. But Mira put it on without complaint, braided her hair back tight, and learned the routine. Polish the floors. Dust the surfaces. Clean the conference room after midnight meetings that left the smell of cigar smoke and something darker, gunpowder, maybe, or blood. She never saw her employer for the first 3 months. Ha Joon was a ghost in his own home, a name spoken in whispers by the other staff, a presence felt in the way everyone moved through the house with quiet efficiency and lowered eyes. Mira caught glimpses, a tall figure in a dark suit disappearing into an elevator, a hand with tattooed knuckles lifting a glass of whiskey in the shadows of the study. But never a face, never a conversation. Until the night everything changed. It was 2 in the morning when Mira heard the commotion. She'd been finishing the third-floor hallway, moving silently in her soft-soled shoes, when the private elevator chimed. Voices, harsh, urgent, spilled into the corridor. Mira knew the rules. She turned toward the service stairs, ready to vanish. Wait. The command froze her mid-step. She turned slowly, her heart hammering against her ribs. Ha Joon stood in the hallway, and for the first time, Mira saw him clearly. Towering at least 6'2", broad shoulders filling out a white dress shirt that was torn at the shoulder and stained dark across the ribs. His hair, jet black and styled in a sharp undercut, was disheveled. But it was his neck that made her breath catch, an intricate tattoo of a tiger and flowers wound from behind his ear down to his collar, the ink so detailed it seemed to move in the dim light. His face was striking, sharp cheekbones and a jaw that looked carved from stone, but his eyes were what held her. Dark, bottomless, and fixed on her with an intensity that felt like being pinned by a predator. Blood dripped from his left hand onto the white marble. "You." His voice was low, textured with pain and something else. "Come here." Every instinct screamed at Mira to run. But she learned long ago that running from powerful men only made them chase. So she moved toward him, her feet carrying her forward even as her mind shouted warnings. "I need," he swayed slightly, catching himself against the wall. His shirt was soaked through now, the stains spreading. "The medical kit. In my bathroom. Get it." Mira nodded, moving past him into the master suite she'd been forbidden to enter. The room was massive, decorated in blacks and golds, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul's glittering skyline. She found the bathroom, all black marble and chrome, and the medical kit under the sink. When she returned, Ha Joon had collapsed into a leather chair, his head tilted back, his breath coming in shallow gasps. The tiger on his neck seemed to snarl in the shadows. "Do you know how to stitch?" he asked without opening his eyes. "Yes." She'd learned on kitchen accidents and bar fight aftermath back home. Mira set the kit on the table beside him, her hands surprisingly steady. "I need to see the wound." He opened his eyes then, studying her with an expression she couldn't read. Then slowly, he unbuttoned his shirt, revealing a muscled torso marked with more tattoos and a deep gash across his ribs that was bleeding freely. "Knife fight," he said simply. "The other man looks worse." Mira didn't ask if the other man was alive. She threaded the needle, sterilized it, and moved closer. "This will hurt. Everything hurts." His eyes never left her face as she began to work. "What's your name?" "Mira." She kept her focus on the wound, on the precise movement of needle through skin. "Mira." He repeated it like he was tasting it. "You're not Korean." "No. American. New Orleans. Long way from home." "I don't have a home." The words slipped out before she could stop them. Something shifted in his expression. "Neither do I." She wanted to laugh at that, this man in his fortress, surrounded by staff and guards and luxury. But when she looked up, she saw something in his eyes that she recognized. The same hollowness she saw in her own mirror. The same exhaustion of carrying too much weight for too long. "There," she said softly, tying off the last stitch. "You should see a real doctor." "I have a real doctor. But he's on the other side of the city, and I didn't think I'd make it." Ha Joon reached up, his blood-stained fingers brushing her wrist. "Thank you." The touch sent electricity through her skin. Mira pulled back, gathering the supplies. "I should go." "Stay." It wasn't a command this time. It was a question. A request from a man who probably never requested anything. Mira should have left. Should have disappeared back to her small room in the service wing and pretended this never happened. But she was tired of disappearing. Tired of being invisible. And there was something about the way he looked at her, not like a maid, not like a possession, but like a person that made her stay. They talked through the night. About nothing and everything. About New Orleans jazz and Seoul's nightlife. About scars and survival and the weight of legacies you never asked for. Ha Joon told her about inheriting his father's empire at 23, about the violence required to keep power, about the loneliness of sitting at the top of a pyramid built on fear. Mira told him about growing up poor, about watching her neighborhood devour itself, about the desperation that drove her across the world. As dawn broke over the city, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, something shifted between them. Ha Joon stood, moving to the window, his stitched wound pulling against the bandage. Mira followed without thinking, standing beside him to watch the sunrise. "You should fear me," he said quietly. "Everyone else does." "I know." She turned to look at him, at the exhaustion etched into his features, at the vulnerability that disappeared the moment other people entered a room. "But I don't." He turned to her then, his hand coming up to cup her face with a gentleness that contradicted everything she knew about him. "Dangerous," he murmured. "You're dangerous. So are you." When he kissed her, it felt like falling and flying at the same time. like every reckless decision she'd ever made crystallizing into one perfect, terrible moment. His hands were in her hair, pulling her braids loose, and hers were on his chest, feeling his heartbeat beneath scarred skin. They moved together like two people drowning, clinging to each other in the dark. The silk sheets were cold against her back, just like she'd always imagined. But Ha Joon was warm, solid, real. He touched her like she was precious, like she was the only thing that mattered in his fortress of violence and power. And for one night, Mira let herself believe it. When she woke, the sun was high in the sky and she was alone. The sheets beside her still held his warmth, but Ha Joon was gone. Reality crashed over her in waves. She was the maid. He was the master. She'd just crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Mira dressed quickly, her hands shaking as she smoothed her uniform, braided her hair. In the mirror, she looked the same wide eyes, same dark skin, same defensive posture. But something fundamental had shifted inside her. She took the service stairs down, moving through the morning routine on autopilot. Clean the breakfast room. Polish the silver. Disappear. The other staff members moved around her with their usual efficiency, no one looking at her differently. No one knew. Maybe no one ever had to know. But when she entered the main dining room to clear the table, Ha Joon was there. He sat at the head of the long table, dressed in a fresh suit, his hair perfectly styled, his posture radiating the cold authority she'd seen from a distance but never experienced up close. The man who'd held her through the night was gone, replaced by the mask of the Goryeo syndicate's leader. Their eyes met across the room. Mira's heart stopped. She waited for what? Acknowledgement? Dismissal? An order to leave the estate and never return? Instead, Ha Joon's gaze traveled over her slowly, deliberately, before returning to the documents spread before him. Coffee, he said, his voice flat. Black, no sugar. It was like being slapped. Mira moved to the sideboard, her hands steady through sheer force of will, and poured his coffee. She approached the table, set the cup beside him carefully, stepped back. Will there be anything else, sir? The title tasted like ash in her mouth. Ha Joon didn't look up from his papers. No. You're dismissed. She left, walking when she wanted to run, keeping her head high when she wanted to hide. Back in the service wing, she locked herself in the staff bathroom and pressed her hands against the cool tile, breathing deeply, refusing to cry. It was one night. It meant nothing. She'd go back to being invisible, back to surviving. That was the plan. But over the next 3 weeks, Mira realized that disappearing was no longer an option. Ha Joon was everywhere. Not physically, he still spent most of his time in his private quarters or away on business, but his presence followed her like a shadow. She'd feel his eyes on her as she worked, look up to find him watching from a doorway before he turned and left without a word. She'd enter a room and smell his cologne, know he'd just been there. Every time she passed him in the hall, the air seemed to compress, thick with unspoken words. The other staff began to notice. Mrs. Kim watched her with narrowed eyes. The guards' expressions shifted from indifference to something harder. Mira tried to work faster, stay quieter, become even more invisible. But it was like trying to hide from a spotlight. Then came the morning she woke up nauseous. At first, she blamed it on stress. The constant tension of working in Ha Joon's presence, of pretending nothing had happened, of feeling his gaze burning into her back, it was enough to make anyone sick. But when it happened the next morning, and the next, and when her period didn't come, a cold dread settled into her bones. No, it couldn't be. They'd been careful, hadn't they? The night was a blur of sensation and desperation, her memory fragmented by desire and fear. Careful enough? She didn't know. Mira waited until her day off, then took the subway to a neighborhood far from the estate. In a pharmacy where no one knew her, she bought 3 pregnancy tests with shaking hands. Back in her small room, she locked the door and took all 3 tests at once. Positive. 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 She sat on the bathroom floor, staring at the plastic sticks like they might change if she looked hard enough. This couldn't be happening. Not here. Not with him. Not when she'd finally found a sliver of stability in her chaotic life. A baby. Ha Joon's baby. The implications hit her in waves. She was a Black American woman working as a maid in a Korean crime lord's house. She was pregnant with his child, the heir to a criminal empire. There was no scenario where this ended well. If the syndicate found out, they'd see her as a threat. If Ha Joon found out, what would he do? Would he believe it was his? Would he think she'd trapped him deliberately? Would he see her as a liability to be eliminated? Mira thought of the blood on his shirt that first night, the casual way he'd mentioned that the other man looked worse. Ha Joon's world was violence, and she'd just become a complication he couldn't afford. She had to leave. Tonight. Before anyone found out. Mira spent the next 8 hours in a fog of panic and planning. She couldn't take much, just a backpack with clothes and documents. Her passport was in a drawer, her return ticket had long expired, but she had some savings. Enough for a flight to anywhere, enough to start over somewhere he couldn't find her. At 3 a.m., when the night shift guards were at their drowsiest, Mira slipped out of her room. She moved through the service corridors she knew by heart, avoiding the cameras, timing her movements to the guards' patrol patterns she'd memorized over months of invisible observation. The side gate was her target, the one used for deliveries, the one that opened onto a service road where she'd called a taxi to meet her. Freedom was 50 yards away. Freedom was a plane ticket. Freedom was raising this child somewhere far from Seoul's underworld. Her hand was on the gate's handle when she heard the footsteps behind her. Going somewhere? Ha Joon's voice cut through the pre-dawn silence like a blade. Mira spun around, her heart hammering, her backpack suddenly feeling like evidence of a crime. He stood 10 feet away, dressed in black pants and a white dress shirt unbuttoned at the collar, his neck tattoo visible in the security lights. His expression was unreadable, but his body language radiated controlled fury. Mira's voice failed her. She swallowed, tried again. I was just running. He moved closer, each step deliberate. You were running from me. I have to leave. Please, just let me go. Why? He stopped directly in front of her, so close she could feel the heat of his body, smell the familiar scent of him that made her stomach twist with memory and morning sickness. What happened? Mira looked up at him, at the sharp angles of his face, at eyes that had gone from indifference to obsessive observation over the past weeks, and knew she had 2 choices. Lie and maybe make it through the gate. Or tell the truth and face whatever came next. Her hand moved instinctively to her stomach. Ha Joon followed the movement. His eyes widened fractionally, the first crack in his controlled facade she'd ever seen. No, it wasn't a denial. It was a realization. How long? His voice had gone dangerously soft. 3 weeks. I'd just found out. I was going to. His hand shot out, slamming the gate shut with a metallic clang that echoed through the courtyard. You were going to what? Disappear with my child? Raise my heir in hiding. Heir? Mira's voice cracked. This is a complication. A mistake. You can't possibly what? Ha Joon leaned in, one hand on the gate beside her head, caging her in. His eyes searched her face with an intensity that stole her breath. Can't possibly want my own blood? Can't possibly want you. You barely looked at me for 3 weeks. You treated me like I wasn't going insane every time you were in the same room. His free hand came up, fingers brushing her cheek. Like I wasn't fighting every instinct to drag you back to my bed every night. I stayed away because I knew I'd lose control again. Because you were supposed to be safe from me. I'm not safe anywhere near you, Mira whispered. Your world will kill me. Kill us. Then I'll burn my world down first. His hand dropped to her stomach, pressing gently against the flat surface where their child grew. You thought you could take what belongs to me across an ocean? You're not leaving with my heirs in you. You're mine now. The possessiveness in his voice should have terrified her. Instead, it ignited something fierce and primal in her chest. I'm not your property. No. Ha Joon's thumb brushed across her lips. You're so much more dangerous than that. You're the mother of my children. The one person in this fortress I'd actually kill for instead of just because of. Children. Mira's eyes widened. I only said I know twins when I hear about them. It runs in my family. His hand remained on her stomach, possessive and protective at once. You're carrying my heirs, Mira. Plural. And that changes everything. Before she could respond, he stepped back, pulling out his phone. Min, he said in Korean when someone answered. Move the rose suite occupant out. Now. I don't care where. The suite belongs to Miss Claire now. He hung up, his eyes never leaving her face. The rose suite is in the family wing, connected to my rooms. You're done living in the service quarters. I don't want your gilded cage. Too bad. Ha Joon's smile was sharp. Because you're not leaving it. Not until I know you're safe. Not until those children are born. Not. He stopped himself, jaw clenching. You want freedom? Earn it. Survive this world long enough to demand it. But don't you dare try to run from me again. He turned and walked toward the main house, then paused, looking back over his shoulder. Oh, and Mira? If you try to leave again, I'll follow you to the ends of the earth. And I won't be gentle when I bring you back. Mira stood at the gate, her escape route blocked, her future rewritten, and realized with terrible clarity that she'd just become something far more dangerous than Ha Joon's maid. She'd become his obsession. The Rose Suite was a prison disguised as paradise. 3 rooms, a bedroom, a sitting area, and a bathroom that could fit her entire former quarters twice over. Everything was decorated in soft pinks and golds, with a massive bed that felt like sleeping on clouds and windows that overlooked a private garden. Beautiful. Suffocating. The door locked from the outside. Mira discovered this on her first night when she tried to leave for water. The handle wouldn't turn. She stood there in the silk pajamas that had been laid out for her replacement for her own worn clothes and felt the reality of her situation crystallize. Protected prisoner. That's what she was now. A soft knock interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Miss Claire. A young woman's voice, speaking English with a slight accent. I'm Ji-won. Mr. Ha has assigned me as your personal attendant. May I come in? The door opened from the outside, revealing a petite woman in her mid-20s with a kind face and nervous eyes. She carried a tray with water, crackers, and ginger tea. For the morning sickness, Ji-won said gently, setting the tray down. Mr. Ha said you might need this. Of course he knew. Ha Joon seemed to know everything. Thank you. I'm to stay with you. Help you with anything you need. Ji-won's smile was genuine, but her eyes held a warning. Mr. Ha said you might try to leave again. He asked me to discourage that. So you're a guard. I'm a friend, Ji-won corrected softly. Trust me, Miss Claire, you want to be here. The syndicate, when they find out about the pregnancy, many won't be happy. Here, at least you're protected. By the man who imprisoned me. By the man who's falling apart trying to keep you alive. Ji-won moved to the windows, checking the locks with practiced efficiency. I've worked for Mr. Ha for 3 years. I've never seen him like this. He canceled meetings today. Ha Joon doesn't cancel meetings. Mira sank onto the bed, exhaustion crashing over her. What happens now? Now? You rest. You eat. You take care of yourself and those babies. Ji-won's expression softened. And tomorrow, the council meets. They're going to find out about you. Will they kill me? Ha Joon will kill them first. Ji-won said it with such certainty that Mira almost believed it. Get some sleep, Miss Claire. Tomorrow, everything changes. The Council of Elders met in a room Mira had cleaned 100 times but never entered while occupied. Dark wood panels, a long table, windows overlooking the city. 12 men in expensive suits, their faces ranging from skeptical to openly hostile, sat in judgment. And at the head of the table, Ha Joon sat like a king on a throne, his expression carved from ice. Mira stood beside his chair, her hand resting on the high back for support, feeling their eyes crawl over her like insects. Ji-won had dressed her in a simple black dress, elegant but modest, meant to show respect. But Mira knew no amount of respectability could change what she represented. Disruption. Weakness. An outsider contaminating their pure bloodline. Gentlemen, Ha Joon began in Korean, his voice cutting through the murmurs. I've called you here to announce that I will become a father. Twins. Due in 7 months. The silence that followed was deafening. Then an older man at Ha Joon's right, gray-haired, stone-faced, wearing a pin that marked him as second elder, spoke. And the mother? Is standing beside me. Ha Joon's hand moved to cover Mira's where it rested on his chair, his fingers lacing through hers. The gesture was possessive and protective at once. Miss Mira Clair. She's another elder, younger, with cold eyes. She's not Korean. Observant, Ha Joon said dryly. She's a maid. The second elder's voice dripped disdain. A servant. An American. And you expect us to accept her children, as legitimate heirs to the Goryeo syndicate? I expect, Ha Joon said, his voice dropping to a deadly register, you to remember that I lead this syndicate. Not you. Not the traditions that died with my father. Me. Your father's will required an heir by my 30th birthday. In 4 months, I will have 2. Ha Joon stood, pulling Mira up with him, positioning her in front of him with both hands on her shoulders. These children carry my blood. That makes them more legitimate than any of your opinions. The second elder stood as well, his face flushed with anger. You shame your father's legacy. You shame our organization. Bringing this woman, into our ranks, expecting us to bow to her bastards. Ha Joon moved so fast Mira didn't see it coming. One moment he was behind her, the next he was across the table, his hand fisted in the second elder's collar, a knife pressed to the man's throat. The blade caught the light and Mira saw the handle, engraved with a tiger, matching his tattoo. Say that again, Ha Joon whispered. Call my children bastards one more time. The room erupted. Men stood, hands moving toward weapons, voices raised. But Ha Joon didn't flinch. His eyes stayed locked on the second elder, the knife steady against the man's pulse point. Ha Joon. An elderly man at the far end of the table, the first elder, Mira realized spoke with a voice of weathered authority. Enough. For a long moment, Ha Joon didn't move. Then slowly, he released the second elder, stepping back. But his eyes promised violence deferred, not forgotten. I will not tolerate, Ha Joon said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room, disrespect toward Miss Clair or my children. The next person who questions their legitimacy will lose more than face. He turned to the first elder. The syndicate needs an heir. I'm providing 2. Whether you accept them with grace or force is your choice. But make no mistake, they will be accepted. The first elder studied Ha Joon for a long moment, then shifted his gaze to Mira. She met his eyes despite the fear coiling in her stomach, refusing to look away, refusing to seem weak. The children will need protection, the first elder said finally. As will their mother. The Kim family will see this as an opportunity. As will others. Then we prepare for war. Ha Joon moved back to Mira, his hand finding the small of her back. And we win. As we always do. The meeting concluded with tense silence and meaningful looks. As the elders filed out, Mira felt the weight of their judgment, their anger, their prejudice. She'd just become the most hated woman in Seoul's underworld. Ha Joon led her back to the rose suite, his hand never leaving her back. Once inside, he locked the door and turned to her, his controlled facade finally cracking. I'm sorry, he said quietly. For what they said. For what they'll say. You put a knife to a man's throat for me. I'll do worse to anyone who threatens you. His hand moved to her stomach again, that gesture that was becoming familiar. Or them. Mira looked up at him, at the tiger inked on his neck that seemed to symbolize everything he was beautiful and deadly, impossible to tame. I didn't ask for this. Neither did I. Ha Joon's thumb traced circles on her stomach through the fabric of her dress. But I'm not letting you go. I can't. Even if you hate me for it. I don't hate you. The words surprised her with their honesty. I'm terrified of you. Of this. Of what comes next. Good. He pulled her closer, his forehead resting against hers. Fear keeps you sharp. Keeps you alive. And Mira, you need to stay alive. Because I'm about to start a war and you're the reason I'm fighting. In the days that followed, Ha Joon's prediction proved accurate. The syndicate fractured along ideological lines. Traditional families who saw Mira as a contamination of bloodlines versus Ha Joon's loyal supporters who understood that challenging him meant death. Mira, trapped in her rose-colored cage, watched Seoul transform into a battlefield from her window and realized with terrible clarity that Ha Joon hadn't been exaggerating. He was willing to burn his entire world down for her. The question was whether they'd both survive the fire 3 months past in the gilded prison of the Rose Suite. Mira's body changed, expanding with life despite her captivity. The morning sickness faded, replaced by exhaustion and a restlessness that no amount of luxury could soothe. Ji-won became her anchor to sanity, bringing books and gossip from the outside world, teaching her basic Korean phrases, sitting with her during the long nights when fear kept sleep at bay. Ha Joon remained a constant shadow. He worked from the study adjacent to her suite, close enough that she could hear his voice through the walls when he conducted business in Korean, sharp commands, cold negotiations, occasional threats delivered with lethal calm. He took his meals with her, silent dinners where the tension between them felt thick enough to cut. He checked on her before bed, his hand always finding her stomach, his eyes searching her face for signs of distress. But they didn't talk. Not really. Not the way they had that first night when vulnerability cracked them both open. Until the evening Mira felt the first flutter of movement. She was reading in the sitting room, Ji-won having just left for the night, when the sensation came, like butterfly wings against her insides, gentle and impossibly real. Her hand flew to her stomach, pressing where she'd felt it, waiting. There. Again. Ha Joon. His name left her lips before she thought about it, loud enough to carry through the walls. He appeared in seconds, his expression tight with concern, his hand already reaching for the gun at his hip. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Mira grabbed his hand, pulling him down to sit beside her on the sofa. Give me your hand. He tensed but complied, letting her guide his palm to the swell of her stomach. They sat in silence, his hand warm and heavy against her, the moment stretching between them. Wait for it, she whispered. Then it happened, the flutter, stronger this time, pushing against Ha Joon's palm. His entire body went rigid. His eyes widened, that controlled facade shattering completely. Was that one of them? Yes. Mira kept his hand pressed to her stomach, watching his face transform. The cold mask he wore for the world melted away, leaving something raw and vulnerable and achingly human. It's real, he breathed. I mean, I knew it was real, but another kick harder. Ha Joon's other hand joined the first, both palms spread across her stomach now, his eyes fixed on where their children grew. A smile, genuine, unguarded, broke across his face. It changed everything about him, softened the sharp edges, revealed the man he might have been in a different life. They're strong, he said, wonder threading through his voice. Like their mother. Strong enough to survive this? Mira asked quietly. This world you've pulled us into? Ha Joon's smile faded. He looked up at her, his hands still cradling her stomach. I know you hate me for keeping you here. For trapping you in this cage. But Mira, his voice cracked slightly. I've lost everyone I ever cared about. My mother when I was 12. My father 2 years later. Everyone who gets close to me ends up dead or destroyed. And I told myself I didn't care. That I'd rule alone. That love was weakness. He pressed his forehead to her stomach, his breath warm through her dress. Then you stitched me up with steady hands and looked at me like I was human instead of a monster. One night, and you destroyed every wall I'd built. And now you're carrying my children and I'm supposed to pretend I can let you go? I can't. Even if that makes me a villain in your story. Mira's hand moved to his hair, fingers threading through the dark strands. You are a villain. But you're also the only person standing between me and 100 people who want me dead. Ha Joon lifted his head, his eyes searching hers. If I could give you freedom without risking your life, I would. But the moment the syndicate learned about the pregnancy, you became a target. The traditionalists see you as a stain on our legacy. The rival families see you as my weakness. And they're right. You are my weakness. These children are my weakness. And in my world, weakness gets exploited. So what do? We survive. His hand cupped her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. We fight. And when the dust settles, I'll give you a choice. Stay with me or leave. But right now, survival is the only option. Another kick, strong enough that they both felt it. Ha Joon's smile returned, smaller but real. Fighters. Both of them. They get it from their father. Mira leaned into his touch despite herself, despite everything. The terrifying crime lord who put a knife to a man's throat for insulting his unborn children. I'd do it again. Ha Joon pulled her closer, his lips brushing her forehead. I'd do worse. I have done worse. The second elder disappeared 2 weeks ago. Did you know that? Mira's breath caught. You killed him. I sent a message. His voice held no remorse. Disrespect my family and you disappear. It's working. The council has been remarkably respectful since then. She should have been horrified. Should have recoiled from a man who murdered to protect his pride. But all Mira felt was a twisted sense of safety. In Ha Joon's world, violence was love. Protection meant elimination of threats. And right now, carrying his children in hostile territory, she needed that brutal love to survive. Show me, she whispered. Ha Joon's eyes darkened with understanding. Show you what? That I'm not just a prisoner. That this isn't just about the babies. She took his hand, guiding it from her stomach to her chest, over her racing heart. Show me I matter to you beyond what I'm carrying. He kissed her then, deep and claiming, his hands tangling in her braids the way they had that first night. When he pulled back, his voice was rough. You matter more than you know. More than is safe for either of us. They made love on the sofa as the sun set over Seoul, slow and careful of her changing body, and for the first time since the gate confrontation, Mira felt like more than a vessel. She felt seen, wanted, cherished, in the violent way Ha Joon knew how to cherish. Afterward, lying in his arms as the room darkened, Mira noticed the bracelet on her wrist catching the lamplight. Ha Joon had given it to her 2 weeks ago, delicate white gold with small diamonds, beautiful and surprisingly thoughtful. She'd worn it every day, touched by the gesture. Now, studying it more closely, she noticed something. A small irregularity in one of the links. A tiny seam that didn't quite match the others. Her stomach dropped. Ha Joon, she said carefully. This bracelet. Where did you get it? He tensed slightly against her. Why? Just curious. She sat up, examining it under the lamp. The seam was definitely there, a compartment of some kind. It's beautiful. Custom made. His voice had gone neutral. Guarded. Mira worked her thumbnail into the seam, and it popped open, revealing a tiny electronic chip nested inside. A GPS tracker, small, sophisticated, impossible to remove without taking off the bracelet. She turned to Ha Joon, the bracelet dangling from her fingers. A tracking device. He didn't deny it. Yes. You've been tracking me this entire time. You tried to run once. I needed to ensure you couldn't do it again. Ha Joon sat up, his expression unapologetic. The estate has security, but if you somehow got past it, you'd know exactly where to find me. Mira's voice was hollow. For a moment, she'd let herself believe in something real between them. But this was just control. I'm not a person to you. I'm a possession with a GPS tag. You're everything to me. Ha Joon reached for her, but she pulled back. Mira, listen, no. She stood, wrapping the silk robe around her expanding body. You listen. I know what I am here. I know I'm trapped. But I thought, her voice broke. I thought maybe you actually cared. But you're just keeping tabs on your investment. It's not like that. Then take it off. She held out her wrist, the bracelet still dangling. Remove the tracker. Show me you trust me. Ha Joon's jaw clenched. I can't. Because you don't trust me. Because the Kim family has been watching this estate for weeks. The words came out sharp, urgent. Because 2 days ago, one of their scouts was caught trying to bribe a guard for your schedule. Because if you step foot outside these walls without me knowing exactly where you are, you're dead within an hour. The air left Mira's lungs. What? The Kims want you dead. The Song family wants you dead. 3 other rival factions want you dead because they see this pregnancy as proof that I'm weak, distracted. Ha Joon stood, gripping her shoulders. That tracker isn't about control. It's about keeping you alive. If they take you, I need to find you immediately. Every second matters. You could have told me. Mira's anger deflated into fear. You could have explained instead of just, I didn't want to scare you more than you already are. His hands gentled on her shoulders. But clearly, hiding the truth was the wrong choice. Mira looked at the bracelet, understanding shifting her perspective. Not a leash. A lifeline. How bad is it? The threat. Bad enough that I've tripled your security detail. Bad enough that Ji-won is actually a trained bodyguard, not just an attendant. Ha Joon fastened the bracelet back around her wrist, his fingers lingering on her pulse. Bad enough that I don't sleep anymore because every shadow could be an assassin. Why didn't you tell me? Because you're carrying my children, and stress isn't good for them. Because I wanted to give you the illusion of peace, even if it was a lie. He pulled her close, his hand protective over her stomach. I'm handling it. By murdering people who look at me wrong? By eliminating threats before they become problems. Yes. Ha Joon's voice held steel. I won't apologize for keeping you safe. Before Mira could respond, Ha Joon's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression went cold. I have to go. Security issue. What kind of stay here? Don't leave this suite. Promise me. The intensity in his eyes made her nod. I promise. He kissed her hard, possessive, then disappeared through the connecting door to his study. Mira heard his voice raised in rapid Korean, angry and commanding. Then silence. She stood in the sitting room, hand on her stomach, feeling the baby's kick against her palm, and wondered how long they could survive in this pressure cooker before something exploded. The answer came 3 days later. Mira woke to Ji-won shaking her shoulder, the woman's face pale in the pre-dawn darkness. Miss Clair, we need to move. Now. What's happening? Mira struggled to sit up, her pregnant body unwieldy. The estate's been compromised. Someone disabled the outer security grid. Ji-won was already pulling clothes from the closet: dark pants, a loose shirt, flat shoes. Mr. Ha is in the lower levels dealing with it, but he wants you in the safe room. Safe room. Hidden behind the library. Come on. Mira dressed quickly, her heart racing. Ji-won led her through the quiet halls, past the study and down a corridor Mira had never noticed. The library was a small room lined with books in Korean and English, but Ji-won went straight to a specific shelf and pressed something. The entire bookcase swung inward, revealing a reinforced steel door. Code is your birthday plus Ha Joon's. 4-digit month and day, no year. Ji-won pushed the door open, revealing a room about 10 by 10 feet, stocked with supplies, medical equipment, and a bank of monitors showing security feeds. Lock it from the inside. Don't open for anyone except Mr. Ha's voice verification. Ji-won, I need to help secure the main house. You'll be safe here. Ji-won pressed a gun into Mira's hands. Do you know how to use this? Point and pull trigger? Close enough. Stay quiet. Stay hidden. Ji-won started to leave, then turned back. Miss Clair, Mira, Mr. Ha loves you. Whatever happens tonight, remember that. Then she was gone, and Mira was alone in the safe room, punching in the code with shaking fingers. The door sealed with a heavy thunk, and suddenly the silence was absolute except for the muffled sounds of her own breathing. She sank onto the cot provided, gun clutched in her lap, and stared at the security monitors. The estate grounds were dark, but she could see shadows moving, too many shadows, too organized. This wasn't a simple break-in. This was coordinated. An attack. On one screen, she saw Ha Joon moving through the lower corridors with 5 guards, his gun drawn, his expression lethal. He was hunting. On another screen, figures in black were breaching the main entrance. Professional. Military-grade equipment. This wasn't just the Kim family. This was bigger. Hours passed in agonizing slowness. Mira watched Ha Joon and his guards engage the intruders, watched bodies fall, watched her world dissolve into violence. The babies kicked against her ribs, agitated by her stress, and she pressed her hand to them, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. Then one of the screens flickered, showing a figure Mira recognized entering through the service gate. Minho, Ha Joon's second-in-command, the man who'd been with him for 5 years, who'd helped coordinate her move to the Rose Suite. He was letting more intruders in. Mira's blood went cold. The betrayal wasn't just an outside attack. Someone on the inside had sold them out. And from the way Minho moved, confident, unhurried, this had been planned for a long time. She grabbed the radio Ji-won had left. Ha Joon. Her voice shook. Ha Joon, can you hear me? Static, then his voice, rough and breathless. Mira? Are you in the safe room? Yes, but Ha Joon, it's Minho. He's letting them in through the service gate. He's the traitor. Silence. Then a string of Korean that needed no translation, pure fury. Stay where you are, Ha Joon commanded. I'm handling it. The monitors showed Ha Joon changing direction, moving toward the service entrance with lethal purpose. Mira watched, helpless, as he confronted Minho in the courtyard. Even without sound, she could read the betrayal in Ha Joon's body language. The devastation of discovering his most trusted man had sold him out. The confrontation was brief and brutal. Minho raised his gun. Ha Joon was faster. The screen erupted in violence, and when it cleared, Minho was on the ground, Ha Joon standing over him, his expression carved from ice. But the damage was done. At least 20 intruders had made it inside. And they knew where they were going. Toward the library. Toward her. Mira watched them approach on the monitors, her breath coming in short gasps. She checked the gun Ji-won had given her loaded, safety off. The babies kicked frantically, sensing her panic. She pressed her hand to them, trying to stay calm, failing completely. The door handle rattled. Then something heavy slammed against the steel. Once. Twice. This door is reinforced, a voice called through in accented English. But we have explosives. Come out, Miss Clair. Make this easy. Mira raised the gun with shaking hands, aiming at the door. Go to hell. Laughter. Mr. Kim sends his regards. He wants the American bitch who thinks she can birth the next generation of the Goryeo syndicate. He wants to watch you bleed. Another slam against the door. This time, Mira heard the whine of power tools. They were cutting through. On the monitors, she saw Ha Joon fighting his way back through the house, taking down intruders with brutal efficiency. But he was too far away. He wouldn't make it in time. Then the pain hit, sharp and sudden, cramping across her abdomen. Mira gasped, doubling over. No, not now. It was too early. She was only 6 months along. Another contraction, stronger. Her water broke, warm and sudden, soaking her pants. Labor. She was going into labor. No, 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 Mira whispered, clutching her stomach. The babies were coming. They were coming right now, and she was alone in a sealed room with killers trying to break down the door. The cutting intensified. She could see the lasers glow through a growing seam in the steel. Another contraction. Mira bit down on her scream, sweat breaking across her forehead. She fumbled for the radio. Ha Joon. The babies, they're coming. Hold on. His voice was strained, desperate. I'm almost there. Just hold on, Mira. But the contractions were too close together, the pressure too intense. This was happening whether she was ready or not. Whether anyone was ready or not. The door's seam widened. A hand reached through, feeling for the lock. Mira raised the gun and fired. The hand jerked back with a scream. Bitch shot me. Next one goes through your head. Mira shouted, then immediately regretted it as another contraction tore through her. She slid to the floor, the gun clattering beside her, her body taking over with primal urgency. The babies were coming. Now. On the monitors, she saw Ha Joon reach the library, saw him take in the situation, the cut door, the intruders surrounding it, the sound of Mira's muffled scream from inside. His expression transformed into something beyond rage, beyond human. He became the tiger inked on his neck, a predator defending his den. What followed was carnage. Ha Joon moved through the attackers like death incarnate, his gun an extension of his fury, his knife finding throats and hearts with surgical precision. The monitors couldn't capture the full horror of it, but Mira saw enough. Saw the moment he ran out of bullets and switched to hand-to-hand combat, brutal and efficient. Saw him break a man's neck with his bare hands. Saw him press his knife into the last intruder's throat until the man stopped moving. Then silence. Mira. Ha Joon's voice through the door, ragged with exhaustion and fear. It's me. Open the door. Can't. Her voice broke on a sob. The babies, Ha Joon, they're coming. Override code. 7529. He was already punching it in. The damaged door groaned open, revealing Ha Joon covered in blood, none of it his own. His eyes found her on the floor, her pants soaked, her body shaking, and every ounce of his controlled fury melted into terror. "Help me," Mira gasped as another contraction hit. Ha Joon was beside her in an instant, his blood-stained hands cradling her face. "Ji-won," he shouted. "Get Dr. Seo here now. And someone clean this fucking hallway." "No time," Mira panted. "They're coming now." "Ha Joon, I can feel I know." "I know." He moved to support her, his training kicking in despite his obvious panic. "You can do this. You're strong. You're the strongest person I know." "I'm terrified." "So am I." His hand found hers, squeezing tight. "But we're doing this together. You hear me? Together." Ji-won appeared, her face bloodied but alive, carrying the medical supplies from the safe room. Dr. Seo, a small man in his 60s, arrived minutes later, out of breath but professional. "She's in active labor," Dr. Seo announced after a quick examination. "Too late to move her. We deliver here." "Here." In a safe room with a damaged door, surrounded by bodies in the hallway, with Seoul's gang war raging outside. But Mira didn't have a choice. Neither did the babies. The next hour dissolved into pain and pressure and Ha Joon's voice in her ear, grounding her, keeping her present. His hand never left hers, even when she squeezed hard enough to break fingers, even when she screamed obscenities at him in English that made Ji-won blush. "I hate you," Mira sobbed during a particularly brutal contraction. "I know," Ha Joon murmured, his lips against her temple. "Hate me later. Right now, push." She pushed. And pushed. And pushed. "First baby," Dr. Seo announced. A boy. The sound of crying filled the room, thin, reedy, beautiful. Mira's son. Ha Joon's son. Their son, born in violence and blood, but crying proof of life against all odds. Ha Joon's face crumpled. Tears tracked through the blood and grime on his cheeks as Ji-won placed the baby, impossibly small, impossibly perfect, on Mira's chest. "He's beautiful," Ha Joon whispered. "He's perfect. You're perfect." "One more," Dr. Seo said firmly. "One more, Miss Clair." The second baby came faster, another boy, just as loud as his brother, just as perfect. Dr. Seo worked quickly, cutting cords, clearing airways, wrapping the twins in soft blankets, while Mira collapsed back against Ha Joon's chest, exhausted beyond measure. "Two boys," Ha Joon said, wonder threading through his voice as Ji-won placed the second baby beside his brother on Mira's chest. "Twin sons." Mira looked down at them, her babies, Ha Joon's babies, miraculously alive despite everything. They had his dark hair and eyes, her nose and mouth, a perfect blend of two worlds that weren't supposed to mix. "They need names," she whispered. Ha Joon's arms came around all three of them, Mira and the twins, his family, his world. "Later. Right now, they just need to breathe. You all just need to breathe." Outside the safe room, the estate was a war zone. But inside, in this small space that smelled of blood and birth and new life, there was peace. The dawn broke over Seoul 3 hours later, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Mira had been moved to Ha Joon's bed, the first time she'd been in his actual room, cleaned up and tended to by a team of medical staff Ha Joon had brought in. The twins slept in a bassinet beside the bed, their tiny chests rising and falling in perfect synchronization. Ha Joon stood at the window, showered and changed, his phone pressed to his ear. He'd been making calls since the delivery, his voice alternating between commanding and cold. Managing the aftermath. Containing the damage. Eliminating remaining threats. When he finally hung up and turned back to her, Mira saw the exhaustion etched into every line of his face. But underneath it, something else. Something lighter. "It's done," he said simply. "The Kim family has been neutralized. The Song family has surrendered. The council called an emergency meeting, and I told them to fuck themselves and wait until my sons were named." "Ha Joon." Mira's voice was hoarse from screaming. "Minho." "Why?" "Money. Power. The usual." Ha Joon sat on the edge of the bed, his hand finding hers. He thought betraying me would earn him a seat at the Kim family's table. He was wrong. Is he dead? Yes. No hesitation. No remorse. I made it slow. Mira should have been horrified. Instead, she just felt numb. Where do we go from here? Ha Joon looked at the twins, his expression softening. I have a proposal. For you and for the council. He pulled an envelope from his jacket, handing it to her. Open it. Inside were documents, business proposals, legal contracts, corporate structures. Mira scanned them, her tired brain trying to make sense of the dense language. I don't understand. I'm moving the Goryeo syndicate into legitimate business. Tech ventures, specifically. Blockchain, cybersecurity, digital infrastructure. Ha Joon's voice was calm, measured. The criminal side will be phased out over the next 3 years. No more drug running. No more protection rackets. Clean money, legal power. Why? Because I want my sons to inherit an empire, not a war. He reached out, his finger tracing one baby's tiny hand. Because I want them to have a choice I never had. Because I want you to be able to walk outside without looking over your shoulder. Mira's eyes filled with tears. You're doing this for us? I'm doing this for me. Selfish, remember. Ha Joon's smile was crooked. Turns out I want to live long enough to see these boys grow up. And that means changing the game entirely. The council will never agree. The council will agree or be replaced. His voice hardened. I just gave birth to the heirs they demanded. Twins. Male. Born in the middle of a siege that proved my strength and my family's resilience. They have no leverage left. This is happening. One of the twins began to fuss. Ha Joon reached into the bassinet without hesitation, lifting the baby with surprising confidence for a man who'd probably never held an infant before. He cradled his son against his chest, the tiger tattoo on his neck visible above his collar, the contrast between violence and gentleness striking. We need names, he said softly, looking at Mira. You choose the American names. I'll choose the Korean ones. They'll carry both. Bridge both worlds. Mira studied the baby in Ha Joon's arms, then his brother sleeping peacefully. Daniel, she said finally. Daniel for the one you're holding. And Michael for his brother. Both strong names. Biblical. Names that traveled from one world to another, just like their parents. Daniel and Michael. Ha Joon tested the names. In Korean, Daejeong and Minjae. Similar sounds, different meanings. Daejeong means great righteousness. Minjae means wise and talented. He looked at Mira, his eyes soft. Daniel Daejeong and Michael Minjae Ha. Does that work? It's perfect. Mira held out her arms for Michael, needing to hold him, needing to confirm this was real. Ji-won carefully transferred the sleeping baby, and suddenly Mira was holding her son, and the weight of it hit her. She'd survived. They'd survived. Against every odd, they were alive. I have something else to say, Ha Joon said quietly, still cradling Daniel. When you're recovered, when the boys are old enough to travel, I'm going to ask you one question. And I'll accept whatever answer you give. What question? If you want to stay. His eyes met hers, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. If you want to build a life here with me. Or if you want your freedom. If you choose to leave, I'll set you up with money, new identities, protection. You and the boys will never want for anything. But you'll be free from me. From this world. Mira's breath caught. You'd let us go? I'd hate it. It would destroy me. But yes. Ha Joon's hand tightened on Daniel, protective and desperate at once. I trapped you once. I won't do it again. When you're ready, you choose. Freedom or family. Either way, the boys are provided for. What if Mira's voice shook? What if I choose both? What if I want freedom and family? Then we negotiate. A small smile crossed Ha Joon's face. You're the mother of my heirs. That gives you power in this world. Use it. Demand what you want. Build the life you want. I'll support it. Even if what I want is a voice in your business decisions? A seat at the council table? Equal partnership instead of possession. Especially then. Ha Joon shifted Daniel carefully, then reached out to cup Mira's face with his free hand. You survived a siege in labor. You shot an assassin through a reinforced door. You birthed my sons in a room surrounded by corpses. If that doesn't earn you a seat at the table, nothing does. Michael stirred in Myra's arms, his tiny mouth opening in a yawn. She looked down at him, at the perfect innocence of new life, then up at Ha Joon holding his brother, and realized something. She'd come to Seoul running from her past. She'd found a different kind of prison, a different kind of danger. But she'd also found strength she didn't know she possessed. Power in the most unexpected place. And a man who'd started as her captor but had become something more complicated, a partner in survival, a father to her children, a protector willing to remake his entire world for their future. "Ask me in 3 months," she said finally. "When I've healed. When the boys are stronger. When you've proven to the council that you're serious about going legitimate. Ask me then, and I'll give you my answer." 3 months, Ha Joon agreed. "But Mira, what?" He leaned in, pressing his lips to her forehead, then to each baby's head in turn. "For what it's worth, I hope you stay. I hope you choose us. Because somewhere between that first night and now, I fell in love with you. And I don't know how to stop." Myra's eyes filled with tears again. "That's not fair. Nothing about this is fair." He pulled back, his smile crooked. "But it's honest. 3 months, you decide. Until then, we survive. We raise these boys. We build something new from the ashes of everything that burned." The council meeting happened 2 days later. Mira watched it via video feed from Ha Joon's room, still recovering, while Ji-won held the sleeping twins. Ha Joon stood at the head of the table, the same table where he'd once threatened the second elder, and announced the birth of his heirs. He held up pictures, the twins, impossibly small and perfect. He listed their names, both American and Korean. And then he dropped the real bomb. "The Goryeo syndicate is going legitimate," he said in Korean, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Over the next 3 years, we will phase out all criminal operations and transition entirely to tech ventures. Those who oppose this change are welcome to leave. Those who stay will be wealthier and more powerful than you ever dreamed." The council erupted. Voices raised in protest, in shock, in anger. But Ha Joon didn't flinch. "I have given you heirs," he continued. "Twin sons born in battle. The prophecy is fulfilled. My position is secure. Now I'm securing their future. And yours, if you're smart enough to see the opportunity." He leaned forward, his hands flat on the table. "The criminal world is dying. The governments are getting smarter, the surveillance is getting better, and the margins are getting thinner. But technology? Technology is the new empire. And we will rule it." The first elder, who'd been silent through the chaos, finally spoke. "And the mother? What role will the American play in this new empire?" Ha Joon's smile was sharp. "Miss Claire will be whatever she chooses to be. But I suggest you treat her with respect. Because she's the one who survived a siege in labor and still managed to shoot an assassin. That makes her more dangerous than half this table." Watching the feed, Mira felt something shift inside her. Power, yes. But also possibility. Ha Joon wasn't just protecting her. He was elevating her. Giving her a seat at the table she'd earned through blood and survival. Maybe she would stay. Maybe this prison could become something else, a home, a partnership, a new kind of freedom built on her own terms. 3 months would tell. The twins woke simultaneously, their cries filling the room. Mira reached for them instinctively, settling them against her chest to nurse. Ji-won moved to help, but Mira waved her off. She needed this moment. Needed to feel her son's weight, their warmth, their impossible existence. On the screen, the council meeting continued, but Mira stopped watching. The future would come whether she was ready or not. Right now, in this moment, she had her sons, her health, and a man who'd just declared war on his own world to give them all a chance. That was enough. For now, that was enough. 3 months later, Ha Joon did ask his question. Mira, standing in the garden with Daniel in her arms while Michael slept in his carrier, looked at the man who'd captured her, protected her, fought for her, and said the only answer that made sense. "I'm staying, but on my terms. Equal partners or nothing." Ha Joon's smile was the sunrise breaking through Seoul's skyline, bright, warm, full of promise. Deal. And somewhere in the city below, the Goryeo syndicate began its transformation from criminal empire to legitimate dynasty, All because a Black American maid from New Orleans had the audacity to survive and demand more than survival. The tiger had learned to build instead of destroy. And the woman he'd tried to cage had become the architect of his redemption. Subscribe to see how this unfolds, and comment where you're watching from. I'd love to say hello to you just to know how far our story is going.